Okay, here we go, pose number 2, where we start to see the way that just a slight bend in the spine changes everything. So this is actually a really good example of just how subtle it is in the direction of her spine. It's really, like her head is pretty much the same, but just that little bit of tilt in the spine is redirecting her shoulders and her hips. So one of the things that you have to think about is these directional lines for shoulders, directional line for hip, and then the curve of the spine. So it's something like this. Very subtle. I mean, there's really not much to it, but it changes everything. And then the next concept that's really important is that concept of negative space, which is basically what you're not drawing. So instead of kind of paying attention to the person, place, thing that you're drawing, you're looking for clues in the shapes that the space around it makes. And you'll get a lot of information by looking at the blank space. So when something's isolated from its background, like that is, it's really helpful. Gets a little more confusing if there's kind of like a standard, scene happening in the background there. All right, so I'll try to make this snappy. All right, so the head, we're going to draw it pretty much vertically. Same idea, about as big as your thumb from the top of your fingernail to that first knuckle. And if you had bigger paper, you could draw a bigger head, but I'm coming up with that measurement just so that it fits on the paper. Just like no other reason. All right, so we're going to go 1 is chin, 2 is armpit, 3 is waist and elbow when the arm is straight. 4 is going to be hip. 5 is going to be your thigh area. 6 is going to be knee-ish. 7 is going to be your shinish. And 8. Okay, remember, standard human is about 8 heads tall. And when you're working from a photo reference, where the photographer is standing is going to kind of make a difference in the way the proportions look. But straight on, if you actually took your skull and measured your skeleton with it, this would be the proportions. All right, so 1.5 shoulder line, and 4.5, 4.25 is going to be crotch and wrist. All right, so I've got my head. Length of the head controls the height. Width of the head is going to control the width of the body. So shoulders and hips will be controlled by the width of the head. So just keep that in mind when you draw that head initially. All right, I'm going to go ahead and drop a spine, slight curve to the 4.25 because that's crotch. I'm going to throw that arrow in there. So now we have a neck, a spine, a crotch. I'm going to take the width of the head. So that was length. Now we're doing width. I'm going to line it up with the shoulders. Oop. Oop. Woman's shoulders are 2 heads wide, and man's shoulders are about 3 heads wide. You don't have to do this next step. It just kind of helps me think, and it's helping me think about the direction that her spine is leading her torso in. So now I'm going to give myself a guide for that shoulder tilt and a guide for that hip tilt, axis being 1.5 and 4. Right, and then everything else stays pretty much the same. I'm going to put that neck in there. It's going to be on a little bit of an angle. Going to put those traps in there. This is where the negative space kind of comes in handy because I can kind of see the difference in this shape than this shape. And, kind of trying to see past her hair too. So this shoulder is a little lower. That shoulder's a little higher because it's going with the curve of the spine. Armhole, armhole, torso, torso, rib cage, hip, 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 hooray. You can look, again, it's for me harder to draw when she has the bodysuit on because I'm not getting the information from her. But if you just look at the bodysuit as a shape, like almost like a negative space in itself, that might help you. I don't know. You do you. All right. And then, all right. So because she's tilted, the shoulder's lower. Because the shoulder is lower, the elbow's a little lower, and then this arm is kind of coming out a little bit, and the wrist is going to be a little lower. So you're going to need to kind of go back and sort of feel that out. And this side, shoulder's a little higher, elbow appears a little higher, and wrist is kind of at hip. Yeah. So a little higher on the left, a little lower on the right because of the shift in her spine. All her weight is on this leg on the right. So knee is going to be a little higher looking on this one and a little lower looking on this one. Right, so knee at 6. I do believe that I put all of these references in the stream. I mean, it's possible things didn't post, or sometimes I try to multi-post to classes, multiple classes, and it just doesn't go. You just never know with Google Classroom. Someone's going to freak out on you. All right, so right now we're just fleshing out. Remember, we talked about tapering. Taper from shoulder to elbow. Taper from elbow to wrist. Taper from shoulder to elbow. Taper from elbow to wrist. And keep the hands simple. It's like those wedge shapes again. And the leg, she's got all the weight here. Little trick for figure drawing is to actually try the pose yourself. It really does kind of give you information. Like your body sort of feels what's happening there, and it makes it easier to draw. So remember, you've got a nice calf there, an ankle, that flat foot. You kind of just draw sort of like a paddle. This leg, she's free to kick you in the face. She's actually not putting a lot of weight on this leg. It's kind of stepping forward. Calf, taper, taper. This foot comes a little bit forward. I think I made that a little extreme. And again, if we were in class, we would be using charcoal, we'd be smearing, we'd be doing and redoing and really looking, trying to perfect things. Check your negative space. That gives you information. Is mine exact? No, it is not. Is it close? Yes, it is. So, curve of the spine controls the direction of your hips and your shoulders, and it will change the appearance of where your elbows and your wrists are, but the actual proportions don't change. The appearance of the proportions changes.